Barnstable This Morning. I'm Sarah Colvin. Excuse me, and joining me live in studio, Town Manager Tom Lynch. Tom, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Good. Did you have a nice weekend?
I did have a nice weekend. Very, very active, and then I relaxed yesterday. How about you?
Not too bad at all. So, but we're getting busy, preparing for the operating budget that's coming up. But I did want to touch a little bit and tell viewers about, be a little more specific from your own newscast where we talked about some of the things that the capital improvement plan passed, and it was a very busy night last Thursday where the town council looked at public road improvements, and we passed $3.25 million to continue that very successful program. And also there were guardrail and sidewalk improvements, and we have some interesting projects there too, because one of the things we hope to do with the sidewalk improvements is to take care of the Kennedy Legacy Trail as it goes through the streets of Hyannis, because when you're inviting tourists and others onto your sidewalks, we want to be sure that all of our handicap grades are right and all of that. So we're going to pick up and finish up on that. Also tackle private roads, and the town council suggested or approved using the sewer and infrastructure trust fund that we had established. So we're going to do 2 private roads that way. Bliss Point Marine, Bliss Point, Inner Harbor and over Barnstable Harbor for dredging was on the agenda, and that generated quite a bit of conversation. It's an expensive project, and dredging is just that. The longer you go, the more difficult it is to and more expensive it is. So we're hoping when we get our comprehensive dredge program in place that you'll be able to do it perhaps a little more frequently, a little less expensive. So we'll see how that plays out. And then
Absolutely.
We did the Austral Bay School, so quite a few projects. And then I think, as you also pointed out in your newscast, the Community Preservation Committee will be considering both the Lombard Field and parking lot and playground improvements to have about $750,000 from the Community Preservation Committee come into that project, and then new windows at the West Barnstable Community Building. So the 2 projects that are left are both in the same village, and we've talked to Lindsay Council and others about the sharing of some of those costs, and we're very hopeful that they'll pass those so we can complete the project at the first meeting in May.
Certainly, and then there certainly has been a lot of discussion about those Lombard Field improvements, a lot of different things they want to do, just because it's such a frequently used place. You have the Luke's Love Playground, you have what I think is one of the most active ball fields in town, yes. And then of course the community building there, so it really is a community center for West Barnstable.
And this was, a project that the consultants were very active in terms of getting all of the interested parties together over in the village and talking to them about ways that we could make improvements there. So hopefully that project will get funded, and the fiscal year 17 capital improvement plan will be in the books.
That's right, and then it will be time to do the operating budget.
That's right. That's right.
So, Tom, a couple of things that happened last week as well were some changes in regulations. There's been a lot of talk. Drones are becoming, I think, more accessible. People love them, and we've seen some videos that are just absolutely incredible that are shot with these. But of course, that's not without concern for people who might want to go to the beach and may not want to see those, or concerns about safety. So there was a hearing about some changes to regulations when it comes to drones.
We had heard a couple of complaints, and specifically Councilor Flores from Precinct 1 over on the north side talked to legal staff about, could we look at our bathing beach regulations, and unmanned aircraft that, on a busy beach, should they be allowed during the regular beach hours and such. And so staff took a look at that regulation and decided to ban unmanned aircraft from our beaches unless there were permission granted from the town manager. So I held a public hearing last week, took testimony, and in the course of looking at the testimony and talking with the Federal Aviation Administration, whatever, they thought that one aspect to our regulation would be in violation of FAA regulations, because they control airspace, and we said the flying of drones above, the beaches. So they suggest that we take that word out, and which left us with a regulation that said you couldn't launch or land these drones or on the beach, and we felt that would be enough to see if it would control the public safety factor that people are concerned about, because our beaches get crowded. It's a great technology to play with. People would be, wanting to do things. So we decided to try this, and we'll see how that works over the course of the year.
Great, and I think it's important to note that yes, we do not control the airspace. That's more the FAA. So
I was talking to the assistant airport manager, Katie Service, and she said, you want to be anyone using drones should check in with the airport. And apparently the FAA has said to local municipal airports, you've got to think about regulations and what you're doing, so that those things are coming into play too. Because as you point out, it's a new technology. It's exciting. There are lots of practical uses of it. You just have to be careful that we're sharing the airspace with others, and we want to be careful about how that's used.
Absolutely. And I know that construction was recently complete on a new columbarium at Mosswood Cemetery, and there was an article in the paper over the weekend about how this is an increasing in popularity for interment, and so there were some changes in terms of the fees for those, correct?
The Kirkman Fund helped really fund the three columbaria, which are units that are built at the cemetery, and they contain individual slots or niches, I believe they're called, and then there are 96 of them. Nice landscaped garden area up to it, and cremation is becoming a very popular option a burial option for families, and but at the same time you want to have someplace where you can visit where your loved one may be. So the cemetery group put together this proposal, and then the regulations I took in were really covering mostly in the interment fees and things of that nature. So they've been approved, and I think that they're scheduling a little ribbon cutting, if you will. So, but it fits very nicely at the cemetery. Anyone driving down to Mosswood and go way into the back, you'll see a very nice landscaped area, and it may be something that our other cemeteries will be looking for here in town. So we'll see how that all works out.
Sure. And you mentioned the Kirkman Fund, and I know that that you made some decisions recently on kind of disbursement for that. So let's talk a little bit about the Kirkman Fund.
The Kirkman Fund is a family trust that was established many years ago by the Kirkland family from Catuit, and it was originally meant to just benefit the cemeteries, and then it was expanded to also include libraries and cemeteries, with Catuit getting an extra share, if you will, of whatever the proceeds of the fund might be. So Bo Murdoch, who's the chair of the chair of the Trust Fund Advisory Committee, Deborah Blanchette, who's our liaison, she's our town treasurer, they came to see me because the committee had reviewed all the applications, looked at those items the cemeteries were looking to get funded, looked at the items that the libraries were asking for, and they distribute the monies based on the way the portfolio has performed, so the way the investments have worked out. So this year there's an additional $75,000 that can go into the cemeteries and $75,000 to our libraries, which is a reduction from past years, but they're not going in the principal, they're just basing it based on the way the fund performs. So they presented those items to me, and I've approved them, and then those checks will be out very shortly to those organizations.
Fantastic. So, at the beginning of our interview, we were talking about the capital budget, mentioned the operating budget. When are we anticipating the operating budget is going to be done and presented to Town Council? Well,
this week we should finish all aspects to it, and it really gets changed right up till the end, because there are some things that we may have been discussing about funding back in December or January, and then things have changed, and we either add or subtract from the budget. So, but I have a draft of my budget statement that I sent back to Mark Milne, our finance director, asked him to, make sure that I've got it accurately put together. We'll be looking at that today and through the week. We hope to have that all wrapped up by the end of the week, so we can go to the printer, and then it would get to the town council for the May 5th meeting. Now that's when they'll actually be handed the copies. That's according to our budget action calendar. What will then happen is that the second meeting, which I believe is the 19th of May, that's when there'll be a first reading on all of the ordinances that we have, all the orders that we have put together. The budget debate will begin the first meeting in June, the second meeting in June. And the council's been, very good about working quickly on that, but there's an awful lot of information, in that budget. And because the budget really is the policy document that brings you through the next year. Every department has its goals and objectives that they put together. The school committee and the school department has worked on their budget. They're, a good 2/3 of it, that, right there. All of our departments have worked very hard. So we'll do a lot of presentations and a lot of work with the council between now and the time that it's adopted.
Fantastic. Well, Tom, I thank you so much, as always, for stopping by and joining us on Barnstable
Thank you
This
very
Morning.
much.
Thank you. Tom Lynch, of course, our town manager, as we start every week here on Barnstable This Morning. Going to send you out to look at that morning view in Osterville. We'll be back with our interim superintendent of schools, Bill Butler.